All right, looks like it's 10, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm very excited to have Autumn here from Greater Chicago Food Depository to present on some of the SNAP and Medicaid changes. So I'll go ahead and turn it to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here today. Apologies in advance for any trickle-in noise you may hear. Um, I'm Autumn. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Senior Manager of Public Benefits Partnerships at the Greater Chicago Food Depository. I'm going to try my best not to bore you too much with some food depository things, but I am going to just highlight why the food depository is speaking about public benefits and like how that ties into some of the work that we do in our mission. I'll talk a little bit about SNAP and Medicaid overview. It'll be very 101. This is what the programs are. We'll talk about the changes that just came down through HR 1, how you can assist folks through those changes, and to go through some frequently asked questions that we're seeing on the ground and that you might also see as well. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of extra tools in that box that you have when you're helping folks navigate these processes. For housekeeping things, feel free to jump off mute, ask questions as we go. Feel free to pop them into the chat. I'm happy to stop and address anything that comes up for folks. Also, I dropped my information in the chat, so if you're like me and you come up with questions like 2 days later at 3 in the morning, feel free to reach out to me with those via email or just call my direct line. So that being said, our mission at the Food Depository is to end hunger, which is big and bold and beautiful and loud, but we can recognize that we can't do that without addressing the root causes of hunger, right? So I think primarily folks associate the work at the Food Depository with the 820 plus pantries that we deliver food to in Cook County. But we all know that handing somebody some food doesn't actually fix the circumstances or get at the root causes that maybe put them in the circumstances of needing that emergency food access. And so we are doing work to advance solutions to address those root causes, and we have named them as poverty, systemic inequity, and structural racism. And for us, this is where the public benefits work comes into play, right? So I'll talk about how SNAP and Medicaid are not just service connectors, but also economic stimulators for individuals and communities. But we know that we need to be looking at, what is existing in the system that causes folks to experience needing to access our emergency food system. A little bit about what that public benefit support looks like. We have kind of two portfolios of work. One is the neighbor support. So you can think of this as just our direct services that we offer to individuals and community. So we have a team of folks who are doing applications. They are also doing case management and case follow-up, because an application means nothing if it gets sent into the ether and then doesn't result in actual connection, right? We are also working with folks through their work requirements, right? Some of those changes coming out of HR 1 that we'll go into in a few slides. And we're also making referrals for other safety net programs. So again, we know that connecting folks to as many resources as possible is one of those key ways to address the root causes of hunger. So we're also working with LIHEAP, the Earned Income Tax Credit, and the WIC program. We have trained some partners to do the same work, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but we also, if folks prefer an in-person application assistance and they don't want to come all the way down to 42nd and Pulaski to have us do it, we do refer them to our partner sites and community who can offer the same services that we provide. And then, of course, we maintain and constantly update a Find Food tool that anyone in Cook County can use to find their pantries nearest to them. And it includes information like where the pantry is, what the service boundaries are, if any, the days that they're open, and what kind of program they're running. So if you want to know, is it a pantry? Is it a soup kitchen? Is it a prepared meals? All of that information is found on the Find Food tool. As far as partner support, my job and my bread and butter, along with my colleague Ronnie, is to take everything that our direct service or our neighbor support team is doing and then find a way to teach our partners to be doing that same work. So we offer on-site enrollment at partner organizations. So if you're an organization that wants to bring SNAP and Medicaid connections to your brick and mortar, but you don't have the staff to dedicate it, cool. we will send one of our neighbor support folks out to do that work. We also make sure that anyone who's interested has materials promoting these public benefits. We offer rolling trainings for those partners who are interested as well. And the trainings are everything from I want to learn how to talk about these programs to I want to learn how to actually enroll folks in these programs and everything in between. We also share best practices and policy updates. We have a really close working relationship with the Illinois Department of Human Services. And so we are meeting with them frequently to learn what's changing and what the implementation of the changes will be. And then we share those out with our partners and our neighbors. And then, of course, we are a part of the Cook County Benefits Hub, which means that we are working in partnership with Age Options and many other lovely organizations to convene together as folks who touch public benefits works and create a strategy that is going to help impact everyone in Cook County, making sure that everyone who is eligible is able to get connected to their benefits. Okay, enough about us. SNAP and Medicaid overview. Again, this will be really high level for y'all. SNAP, what it stands for is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Here in Illinois, we also call it LINK. I'm from Michigan, it's called Bridges there. Each state has their own state nickname for the program. But what you really need to know is that it is the nation's largest anti-hunger program. And it gets used kind of similarly to a regular credit card. So once somebody applies and is approved, then they receive a card in the mail that gets loaded with their benefit allotment monthly, and then they can go to any participating retailer and spend those dollars to acquire food items. What we really love about the program is that it allows for folks to pick their own food, right? So anything that is available at a retailer's that is not prior or previously prepared hot food, such as like your salad bars or your soup bars and things like that. Folks can use their SNAP benefits to purchase those food items. And we are a huge fan, one, because it provides a more dignified experience for individuals. Like, you know what you want to eat and what you need in your pantry, and you should be able to get whatever it is that is, right? Two, it allows for folks to make informed choices on food to support their health, right? If you need low sugar, low carb, low sodium, things that are things that impact your medical well-being, right? If you're allowed to choose your food, then you can select those things. As opposed to visiting a pantry where whatever is on the shelf is whatever is on the shelf. And then also it allows for your food to be culturally sensitive and relevant to the food you like to eat, the food you grow up with, and the food that makes you feel the most comfortable, cozy, and welcomed and loved, right? I won't get too into the weeds and wonky about the funding for the program, but I am going to name it for purposes of setting up some of the changes that we're talking about. Traditionally, the funding from the program is appropriated through Congress, through the Farms Bill. Right now, we're currently watching the new Farm Bill go through appropriations. I'm not going to lie, it's not looking great, but nothing is permanent yet. And you should know that USDA regulates the program. So federal dollars are paying for the benefits that go on individuals' cards when they're spending in the stores, right? And the state is spending money on administering the program. So they're hiring caseworkers, they are just making decisions on cases, they are following up with case management, and figuring out how to implement the program. And then we're traditionally responsible for those costs, right? State administration costs. We have never in the history of the program had to pay for the public benefits themselves or the money loaded onto the card. And then we'll put a pin in that for later discussion. Medicaid, again, super high level. This is also jointly funded by the state and federal government in kind of a similar model, right? Federal government is going to pay for the eligible medical services, and state is going to pay to administer the program and process applications. Long and short of Medicaid, as I feel like we all may know, is it is a program designed to help low-income families or individuals get connected to healthcare coverage, and whether that is healthcare coverage that the federal government is paying for, that the state is paying for, or for a marketplace option. in order to make sure that they can receive care and medical care whenever they need it. So why do these programs matter? I could talk about this for seriously 7 years, so I'll do my best to stay off of my soapbox this morning. Um, for context, the food depository distributes about 500,000 pounds of food a day into Cook County. So we take around, it's anywhere from like a quarter to a 500,000, depending on what the need is in the moment. And then we distribute that over to our 800 pantries, right? And for every meal that can be generated out of that quarter to 500,000 pound of food, SNAP provides 9 times more. So that's 9 times more food, more manpower, more storage space that we and other food banks all across the nation do not have. The emergency food system and pantry system was designed to work with the underlining support and knowledge that SNAP and food stamps were going to continue to exist and support it, right? And we just don't have the ability to make up that gap of 9 times the meals. In addition to connecting folks and the actual individuals who are receiving SNAP with benefits, it also impacts our economy. So it impacts everyone who is living in the United States. For every dollar that is spent with SNAP money, it generates between $1.50 and $1.80 in economic impact. If you're like me, I was like, I need to look that up. I don't know what economic impact means. I'm not the numbers girl. I'm just the process girl. So each time that a dollar changes hands, it actually gains in value. And it allows for retailers to pay for more labor or purchase more goods. And then labor that gets paid then purchases more goods or pays for additional services. And each time that dollar gets turned over into a new sector or into a new like purchasing, it increases the gross domestic product of the local economy. So what that means for Illinois, to just like ground in actual numbers that make sense to me, is for 1 year, that is $6.6 billion of economic, and that's billion with a B, economic activity that we otherwise would not have in Illinois alone, right? That's roughly $262 million in Cook County a month alone. And this is all money that was coming from the federal government and would not otherwise be circulating through our economy if we did not have the SNAP program, right? So this is not just a lifeline for individuals. This is also an economic stimulus that's going to impact the price of everyone's groceries, the availability of all grocery store access, whether or not grocery stores need to close or relocate or raise their prices or lay people off, which then trickles down to the farmers, right? So if grocery stores are not purchasing commodities, then farmers are not selling it, then we're wasting food, and it's all connected. I got on my soapbox. I'm sorry, y'all. Okay, I'll say one last thing before I step down. So if somebody is ever wondering why, if they are a person who is not on SNAP, should care about SNAP, you can feel free to let them know that it is going to impact their grocery experience and the farmers and the economy that they all participate in. And why does Medicaid matter? Medicaid serves our most vulnerable folks. We know that over half of Medicaid spending goes to individuals who are seniors or who are living with a disability, and children make up 1/3 of all the program's enrollees. We also know that kids that are connected to both SNAP and Medicaid do better in school. They miss fewer days due to illness because they're able to get treated for any things that are going on, which means they can stay in school, they get better grades. They are more likely to complete their secondary education, which means higher earnings overall at the end of the day. It also improves access to medical care and financial security for folks. If you have less medical debt, then you have a better credit score, right? If you have a better credit score, then you have the ability to apply for more friendly mortgages or car loans, things that all contribute to your financial wellness. We also know that it's going to lower the amount of uncompensated care at health institutions, which means that if health institutions have healthier budgets, then they can have better programming, hire better staff, hire more staff, expand their programming, look into sustainability planning, right? This program keeps hospitals open, just like SNAP keeps grocery stores open. And then similarly to SNAP, Medicaid is an economic driver as well. The dollars that pay for Medicare services also support jobs in the local community. So supporting our nurses, our doctors, our technicians, our administrators. It boosts participation in the overall workforce because just like kids in school, folks who are connected to Medicaid miss less work. And these cuts to both of these programs are going to have negative economic impacts to all of us. So people will lose jobs in the healthcare industry, people will lose jobs in the retailer and grocery industry. And it'll trickle all down to if those sectors are not spending money, then sectors that supply those services with, goods and services will also suffer. I also really love to shout this out too. If someone is connected to their SNAP benefits, they're actually eligible to receive other benefits just by being enrolled as a SNAP recipient. Um, in Cook County specifically, if you are an older adult or living with a disability or experiencing homelessness, you can actually use your benefits at select restaurants, which is incredible. It's really great for our folks who don't have the ability to cook for themselves, be it because they don't have access to space or they are not able-bodied. And in general, I just think everybody deserves to have a hot meal prepared for them once in a while. So I think this is a really beautiful additional benefit. There are a bunch of free and reduced services that you qualify for, such as internet, phone services, museums, reduced Amazon Prime. One of my favorites is actually the $5 year-long Divvy membership. So you can pay $5 one time if you're a SNAP recipient, and then you can use Divvy bikes to get you anywhere that you need to, which is a great plug-in for our folks who are able-bodied and are facing transportation barriers, right? I also almost always skip this one. Um, you not only qualify for free or reduced internet or technology services, but also discounted technology purchases. So that's huge for our folks who are students or who maybe don't have access to a computer in this moment. If you can prove that you're a SNAP recipient, you should receive a discount on purchasing your cell phone or your laptop, which is a huge way to get folks connected to the internet, which we know is a huge part of existing in this world today. And I would be remiss if I didn't name the other federal programs that you're eligible for. If you have a kiddo under the age of 5, or if you're pregnant or recently pregnant, you qualify for WIC, free and reduced school lunches. You qualify for the LIHEAP program and for summer EBT, as well as Head Start's programming and school readiness programs. I also just learned too that you can qualify for free Walmart Plus, which means you can get your grocery. You can use your SNAP benefits on their app to purchase your groceries and get them delivered without a delivery fee. So who's eligible for these things? Great thing about SNAP and Medicaid is largely that eligibility is like a Venn diagram. There are some differences, but for the most part, they overlap. The state is always going to look at who is applying together and who's on one case, and that's what the state means when they say household size and composition. There are gross and net income requirements for both programs. In Illinois, to receive these, you must live in Illinois. So I cannot get food stamps in Illinois if I'm living in Michigan and vice versa. But lucky for us, your residency here in this state, legally, it begins when you decide it is. So you can move here today and say, I am an Illinois resident, and apply for your benefits. For immigration status, there are some immigration requirements. However, certain non-citizens may be eligible for SNAP and Medicaid, depending on their circumstances and the status that they're here under. And then now, there are certain groups of folks who will be required to meet an additional criteria, which is called work requirements, which we'll jump into in just a moment. For SNAP, the income eligibility, these are current and will stay the same until October 1st of 2026. If you are an individual who is 60 years of age or older or living with a disability, you're what's called a qualified member, which is our column furthest to my right. Those folks are able to make up to 200% of the federal poverty level. Everyone else, or for folks who don't fall into that being 60 years of age or older or living with a disability, you're what's called a general household is how the state refers to it. And for those folks, you are allowed to make up to 165% of the federal poverty level. This chart here is kind of a quick and dirty cheat sheet for, figuring out if someone's potentially eligible. You can essentially scroll down how many people are on the case and then move over to see, like first and foremost, you'll ask like, is anyone 60 years of age or older or living with a disability? And if so, you'll scroll all the way over to the rightmost column. So for 4 people, the total income for the household has to be 5,358 or less. And then if no one is one of those qualified members, the total income for the household for a family of 4 would have to be 4,421. If you're asking why is there a difference between the income level for folks who are qualified members, the reason being is if you are a senior or if you are living with a disability, the state recognizes that you have a lot more expenses associated with your existence and staying healthy, and your needs are just higher. And so you may have more income on paper, but you may also have more expenses to maintain your health and wellness. And this is the state's way of acknowledging that, right? So they give you a little bit of a grace period because, you may be making more money, be 60 years old, but you have to pay for, diabetic test strips and insulin and all these things that mean that the money on the paper is going out the door faster, right? Again, talking a little bit more about that 60 years of age or older. Fun fact, only one person in the household needs to meet either of those criteria in order to be considered a household of qualifying members. So if you are, if you're 2 adults living with your kiddo and then you have a parent who lives with you and they're in their 60s, the entire household is now qualified for that like higher right-hand column of income, which is kind of a nice break and something to keep in mind for sure. It's also worth mentioning that these individuals are eligible for additional what is called expenses or deductions. Meaning that if you're thinking about this like a tax program, right? If I have deductions on my taxes, that means my generalized, what is the word on tax return is going to be higher. It works the same way with benefits. So if you have additional deductions or expenses that you can essentially write off on your SNAP case, then instead of a tax return, your benefit allotment will go up. So these are some of the things that we like to keep in mind when talking to our older adults and our folks who are living with a disability, because ultimately we want to make sure that they're getting as much as possible and everything that they're eligible for when they apply for SNAP and Medicaid. Eligibility for Medicaid, you'll see it's basically the same. The only difference is that they're going to ask they're going to ask you about the age, but it's for purposes of sorting you into which qualifying Medicaid program that you or coverage area that you are eligible for. And then the major difference is that instead of determining that the way that we determine who is on a case together for Medicaid is different for SNAP. So for Medicaid, it's pretty straightforward. It's based on who you file taxes with. So if you're filing jointly with your spouse, or if you claim your kiddo, or anybody living in any dependents in your household, right? All of those folks will be on the same SNAP or Medicaid application. For SNAP, it's a little loosier and goosier. It is more based on who is living together and buying and sharing food together. So you can even have cases where like I'll be on the same SNAP application as my roommate, but we're both on separate Medicaid cases. Real fun. I'm really glad we set it up as simply as possible, right? Some good news for all of us here, SNAP and Medicaid share an application. So you can fill out SNAP at the same time that you're filling out for Medicaid, as long as you make sure that you're checking all of the boxes or checking all of the relevant boxes for each public benefit. The same is true for a Medicare savings program and for cash assistance or TANF. The other great news is the state is going to automatically decide which programs that you're eligible for. So you will get a decision notice for every single one that you apply for. And then B, if you are eligible for Medicaid, the state will automatically decide and filter you into the coverage plan that you are actually eligible for. So you don't need to do this agonizing, and neighbors don't need to do this agonizing of like, ooh, am I in all kids or moms and babies? The state will take care of that for you. And then when we're talking about who can receive these benefits, so once you meet all the other criteria, what is your immigration status requirement in order to receive SNAP and Medicaid, right? US citizens are automatically eligible for SNAP and Medicaid if they meet all of the income requirements, residency requirements, and all those fun things that we already went over. But certain non-citizens are eligible if they meet some additional criteria. If you are a legal permanent resident and you are a minor, so under the age of 18, as long as you have that LPR or green card status, you are eligible from the moment you receive that status. If you are an adult or 18 years or older and you have a green card status, you will have to wait 5 years before you can apply for SNAP. I have refugees and asylees listed here. We will talk about this in depth a little bit more. You'll notice there's an asterisk. That is because the immigration eligibility for these programs have changed at the federal level. However, here in the state of Illinois, we do have some state programs that are administered exactly the same way that folks are potentially eligible for if they are refugees or asylees. The same thing is true for folks who are victims of domestic violence or human trafficking and their children. And I think a big takeaway from this slide too is if you are a non-citizen, you can still apply on behalf of any citizen children that meet or non-qualifying citizen children, right? So if I'm undocumented, when my kiddos are US citizens, I can apply for my kids to receive SNAP and Medicaid. If I'm undocumented and my kids are legal permanent residents, I can apply for my kiddos to receive SNAP and Medicaid, right? Currently, SNAP and Medicaid are not a public charge, so nobody is at risk of impacting their ability to transition immigration status later on. I will say, though, that public charges currently, we're shifting through a change on that rule, and that may be different or become untrue as early as August. So, anyone have questions about the program's high level before we jump into how they've been changed? Okay, you guys are great. So basically about a year ago, the federal budget reconciliation bill was signed into law. And this law is going to and is already impacting some of the largest cuts to SNAP and Medicaid in the history of the programs. You may hear this bill referred to as the One Big Beautiful Bill. Here at the Food Depository, we have other B words for it, but I will spare you. The high level of this is that millions of people are going to lose access to their SNAP benefits and also their healthcare benefits, which means that we know need for food assistance will surge and folks will we'll see a large rise of folks not seeking care for medical issues. There is a real human cost to this. People will go hungry and people will go untreated for life-threatening conditions that they otherwise never had to face or a decision they never had to make prior to this bill. We also know that the loss of these benefits are going to impact our economies negatively everywhere. I can't say this enough, but there will be less money spent at grocery stores, which means there will be fewer jobs, there will be less food produced, there will be more people, there will be either more uncompensated care performed at medical institutions, or there will be people who are unable to survive without the critical medical care that they need. We will see hospitals close, specifically in rural areas, and we will see people die because of these changes. The cuts, so that you know, it's $200 billion from SNAP, and something in the trillions. I think it was 1.3 trillion with a T cuts to Medicaid. And I want to be transparent and name that these cuts were done to offset tax breaks, the cost of tax breaks for billionaires and millionaires and trillionaires, people who are already wealthy. Um, and so that is the logic behind how we got here and why we decided to cut these programs. So how are these changes showing up? And what in what ways are these things being cut, right? I'm going to actually move from right to left, even though that's a little counterintuitive. I think first and foremost, and we've all heard this, you need to know that in order to receive SNAP or Medicaid, there will be some individuals will now be required to work to maintain their benefits. For SNAP, these have already been existing. They are a part of the federal program, but Illinois had previously had a waiver, making us not subject to these work requirements. So not only did we lose our waiver, but it also expanded those work requirements and in fact affected more of the swath of the population. And then for Medicaid, these work requirements are going to be brand new for folks under the ACA or Affordable Health Care Act. The second or middle column is that for both of these programs, many of our legally present neighbors are going to no longer be eligible. For SNAP, this is already true. For refugees, asylees, and 3 other statuses, who are amongst our most vulnerable statuses, I will say as well. They are no longer eligible for SNAP beginning April 1st. Some folks with those statuses are still on the program currently. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but any new applications for refugees, asylees, and some of our other statuses are being denied solely based on their immigration status. For Medicaid, we are going to see those same cuts for immigrants and same eligibility restrictions for immigrants come into effect, we believe, October 1. To put some numbers behind this, for the work requirements for SNAP, we estimated that 450,000 Illinoisans would be impacted. For our neighbors who are immigrants, we estimated that would be 16,000. And we know that the numbers for Medicaid are going to be probably 3 times that for each program or for each reason, right? The final one that I want to talk about is this one furthest on the left here. This is why this specific change is why I called out how these programs are funded, right? So traditionally, state is paying administrative costs. Great, we got that. We've done that for years now. And federal government is paying for the benefits cost. And that was true of SNAP and Medicaid. Post HR 1, all states will be required to cover higher amounts of administration costs. So our bill for the admin portion is going up. Same for SNAP, same for Medicaid. Additionally, now we will be required for our SNAP program to pay a portion of those federal benefits. So a portion of the dollars being put onto cards and then spent in community, which is an expense we have never had to navigate. For the cost that we were expected to pay as a state of Illinois is $800 million a year to keep and administer SNAP for roughly 1.8 million people in our state. I am happy I'm weirdly happy to say that we just received what our estimation of the bill will be for 2027. And the way that the statistics shook out for Illinois, we have received what's called a cost share delay, meaning we will not have to pay anything in 2027. However, we will have to pay something likely in 2028. So even though we're safe in this moment, we know that this is just a moment. And in fact, we are going to have to start preparing for raising money for that bill come 2028. I also want to name that there were only four or five states. I think there were 5 states that received that cost shift delay, which means there are 36 states in our nation currently in this moment at risk of losing SNAP benefits for their entire state. That's more than half of of our country is facing losing a critical life-saving program that gets folks connected to food access. So even though Illinois is safe, we owe it to our neighbors and we owe it to our fellow countrymen to not rest on our laurels and take this year that we have of a delay. We need to now more than ever focus our efforts on getting these cuts reversed at the federal level. Because we know a year goes by in a blink of an eye. Oh, okay, great. For the changes to immigration, I already talked a little bit about SNAP, the refugees and asylees, but the other categories of folks who lost their SNAP and Medicaid eligibility includes our T visa holders. So those are folks who are victims of trafficking or torture or serious crimes. Our humanitarian parolees who are allowed entrance into the US under special protection for less than a year, or who have been here for less than a year. And for our Violence Against Women Act self-petitioners. I don't know that I need to say this in this room, but I think we owe it to say it every time, is that these 5 statuses are among the most vulnerable immigrants to our country. They are fleeing persecution, prosecution, death. They are fleeing unfathomable resources and or circumstances and are choosing to come to the United States for a better life. And once they get here, we're saying, well, we don't have anything for you. Thanks for coming. And you should want to be here because we're the best nation, but we don't have anything for you. So I'll just let that sink in. Again, that for SNAP is already underway. It went into effect April 1. For our Medicaid, we're going to see that in October, likely October 1. I will name that there were some people who fall into these 5 affected statuses who maybe applied March 29th and got approved for SNAP. Those folks will keep their benefits until their 6-month redetermination, but they will not be approved for like post that 6 months. So just naming that, and also naming that for our asylee and T visa holders, we do have a state-funded program called VTTC, or Victims of Trafficking, Torture, and Other Serious Crimes, which allows for those folks to apply and potentially receive. It's basically set up to parallel the federal benefits. So there is a SNAP or food access version, a healthcare version, and a cash version of VTTC. And those folks may still be eligible depending on their circumstances. Work requirements. We are still, full transparency, we are still learning about what the work requirements are going to look like for Medicaid. We know some things. We are still waiting on some guidance from FNS. I'm going to speak to the SNAP ones because those are concrete and we know what they are. And we'll continue to update our partners in this work with the Medicaid as we learn more information. For purposes of SNAP, for folks between the ages of 18 and 64, must work at least 80 hours per month to continue to receive their benefits. That work can be paid or unpaid. It can be done in the form of participating in a SNAP employment or training program, volunteering, or any combination of the above. So you can volunteer for 3 hours and you can work for 77 and you're meeting the work requirement. Failure to meet that work requirement means that you can receive SNAP for 3 months. So, I think my colleague Nolan says 3 strikes, you're out, right? You can receive it for 3 months without meeting the work requirements. And then after which you may lose your benefits for up to 3 years. For us in Illinois, the first countable month was February, meaning May 1st, we saw folks lose their benefits for not being either exempt from this qualification or requirement or for not meeting the requirement. Context for everyone in this room, we lost 100,000 folks May 1st. And then we also lost an additional 40 in the month of June. So we are looking at 150,000 people, which is 5.5 times the population of the town I grew up in, who no longer have access to their SNAP benefits in this moment. There is some silver lining here on these work requirements for SNAP. Exemptions that people can attest to, which means that they don't have to meet this work requirement by law. And then there's also some flexibilities inside of what is working, what is volunteering, what does those 80 hours really mean? And I'm going to talk a little bit about those to help you give some information to folks on the ground. So first and foremost, if you don't fall into the age category, so if you're under 18 or over 64, you don't have to worry about these work requirements. This is a comprehensive list of the exemptions the state of Illinois has agreed to. Exemptions means I don't have to meet this requirement. And we've highlighted some of the ones that we think kind of go oftentimes missed, but are some of the easiest to meet. The examples that I've highlighted are having a mental or physical condition that prevents you or makes it difficult to maintain work. So you don't even have to like not be full stop not working, but like if it's just hard for you to work or makes it difficult for you to maintain work, that means that you are exempt under the second bullet. That can be as expansive and as flexible as like I have social anxiety, and so it makes it hard for me to do a job where I have to be customer facing, right? It can be I have a pretty severe knee issue, and it makes it hard for me to maintain a job, or to do work where I am standing, right? So that second bullet is to be really flexible. If you are pregnant, you are exempt. If you have applied for or are receiving, so applied for, underline, unemployment or SSI, you are automatically exempt. If you are providing healthcare for some individuals, or sorry, not healthcare, but just care. If you're providing care for another person who cannot care for themselves, whether this is inside of your household or outside, you are automatically exempt. Same thing for if you are responsible for the care for a child under the age of 6. And they don't have to be a kiddo in your home. So you could like care for your niece, and be qualifying and meeting the work requirements or be exempt under these work requirements. And then the final one that we like to highlight is, everyone keeps saying it's 80 hours, it's 80 hours, it's 80 hours, but actually it's 80 hours or the equivalent of 80 hours at the federal minimum wage. For simplification of that, if somebody is working less than 80 hours, but they make $935 per month or more, they're automatically exempt from the work requirements. For us in the state of Illinois, our minimum wage is about twice-ish times the minimum wage of the federal government. And so that means like you can make that 935 in potentially 40-ish hours, right? And that still makes you you don't have to make up that additional 40 hours. You are automatically exempt. I think it's worth naming too. I will share these slides with y'all so that you have them. But I can also share where this is linked in the IDHS manual so you can see the list in their words. So how does that show up for Illinois? Now that I've talked about these changes, now that I've talked about some of the implementations that we know, the biggest changes or the biggest things that are going to impact individuals that you're talking to are first and foremost, we have shifted from redetermining these benefits every 12 months to 6, right? So now folks will have to redetermine their benefits twice as often, which means that they're going to have to provide proof and data and receipts twice as often. So more paperwork for our neighbors and more paperwork for the state. Additionally, now we will be required to report shelter costs. So previously, if you were applying for these benefits, if you said your rent was $1,200, we were like, cool, we got you, and we just move on. Now we're going to ask to see some sort of receipt. I think it's important to say that folks who do not provide shelter cost verification will not be denied. But what the state will do is just assume that means that your shelter costs are 0. So it assumes that that deduction that I talked about, those back end like write-offs, is 0, meaning that your benefit allotment or that return that you see is going to go down. For the work requirements, there's a whole new set of processes around that, which is one, proving that you're meeting the work requirements and all the documentation that goes into that, or 2, proving or requesting an exemption, and then following up on the exemption and potentially having to prove what that exemption is. And then something else that I didn't really chat through here. Um, Traditionally, the state of Illinois has been historically very generous on those back end deductions. So we've been as flexible as possible, meaning that we have allowed people to receive the most amount of deductions and therefore the most amount of benefits. Some of our ability to be that generous and flexible has been removed. And so, bottom line for most folks on SNAP, they're going to see a decrease in their benefits any which way that you cut it. Questions so far before we start talking about like how you can help through these changes? Okay, good. Okay, so how can you assist folks with these changes in mind? Um, you can start telling people, hey, you're going to have to do your redetermination every 6 months. This has already started. Most folks should be getting their notices from DHS about their redeterminations, but we know how the mail works and we know that people change addresses and people miss these notifications all the time. So just let folks know if you apply in 6 months, you're going to have to redetermine. If you are working with folks who are on the Elderly Disabled Simplified Reporting Project. These folks do not have to report every 6 months. They're still going to follow the 2-year period. So that's for folks who are 65 and older or living with a disability and have no income. They're automatically going to be on this simplified reporting. They will keep their benefits for 2-year periods. This also means that the interview structure is going to change for SNAP. So folks are going to have to complete SNAP interviews at their first redetermination. So if I applied today, I will do a SNAP interview sometime this month in order to get approved. And then I do another SNAP interview again in 6 months at my redetermination. And then after that, the interview is going to take it's going to be every 12 months. So same scenario, if I apply today, I will do a SNAP interview in order to get my decision. Then I'll do a SNAP interview in 6 months. Then at my next 6 months, I don't have to do a SNAP interview, but I will again at the second. So then it'll alternate, right? So all that means is folks are going to have to be more available to IDHS more often to have these conversations and these interviews. For verifications, I have highlighted the ones that are changing. So these are new documents and new things that we're going to have to let folks know that they need to be prepared to prove. For shelter care costs, that's going to be a copy of a lease. It's going to be rent receipts. It's going to be a letter from the landlord or homeowner stating, yes, this person pays this much a month, right? For work requirements, you will either have to submit an exemption, you will have to submit your volunteer verification, or your SNAP employment and training participation verification, or the other way to prove your work requirement is to just be submitting those pay stubs. So those are the two new things that you can let folks know, like, hey, we're going to need some additional documentation. This is what it is, and here are some examples of those. In terms of getting to, oh, did you have a question, Joe? Um, in terms of figuring out like who do these work requirements apply to, the state has created a screener. I've linked it here and then also shown you pictures of the abe.illinois.gov website. The screener is mostly good. It will walk you through whether someone is even subject to the work requirements, right? Like, are they in that age bracket? And then it'll tell you even further, like, oh, they're potentially eligible because of this reason. Me personally, my favorite way is to determine someone is potentially eligible or exempt is to just have the work requirement exemptions in front of me and kind of ask somebody about their life and their situation and then apply the one that makes the most sense. I think that this screener is great if you're in a time crunch, but if you have the ability to do some of that walking through with someone, just keep those exemptions on hand. These are things that the Department of Human Services is going to ask for regardless. So these have always been a bit of required documentation. You will always need to prove residency or citizenship status or qualifying non-citizenship status. I have a couple of examples here for you, just in case. For the folks who have applied for refugee or asylee status for that VTTC program, you can provide any documentation or receipts from the application process or any copies of any communications that they've received from immigration courts. For the exemption itself, for work requirements exemption, folks have options. You can verbally attest to these over the phone with DHS by calling their helpline, or you can fill out what is called an IL 2341 and send that in with all of your other verifications and document requests from the state. This is a picture of what the form looks like. When I send you all the slides, I can also send you the digital copy of where to find this. For folks, try to fill out as much as this top portion that you can, as much case information and information about the neighbor. You'll need the neighbor to write their name in here. So name of neighbor request. And then feel free to check all of the boxes that apply in regard to an exemption. There is a spot on the bottom of the page here where folks will have to sign. Unfortunately, you can fill this entire sheet out for someone. The only thing you cannot do is do the customer signature unless you're an approved representative. So you can just walk through this, check a box for someone, write their name in, and then hand them for their John Hancock at the end. And then you can submit this to the Department of Human Services on their behalf. So for those exemptions I mentioned, I think the easiest way is for folks to verbally attest. This is the help hotline for our DHS. You can call in and attest to your work requirements right over the phone. If you call this number and you're stuck in like a loop of like not getting a human, you can press 1 and then 3 and then 3, and that'll connect you to a caseworker so that you can get what you need. If you fill out the 2341 and you decide you want to get it back, like do the form process, you can fax it to the Department of Human Services. This is their fax number. This is their central scanning unit. If you send it here, it'll automatically port it to the correct FCRC or Family Community Resource Office or IDHS office, however you call it. If you need help faxing something, you can send pictures to us at the food depository. We will fax it for you. If you have access to somebody's Manage My Case on the ABE website, you can fill out the exemptions there. Or if you have that 2341, you can take it right to the IDHS office and hand it to a caseworker. In terms of proving exemption requests, the state should never ask you to prove the exemption unless you provide contradictory information. So if I say I broke my leg and so it's hard for me to work, they should say, yes, okay, great. And they should not ask me for a doctor's note. They should not ask me for x-rays. They should not ask me for receipts. Unless I say something like, I'm exempt from work requirements because I broke my leg and every Tuesday I have marathon training. Then they're going to say, wait, what? I thought you said you broke your leg. I need more clarification. So as long as you're not contradicting yourself when you're asking or when you're attesting to that exemption, or as long as you're not contradicting yourself when you're filling out that form, you shouldn't have to do any actions after that. For folks who do submit an exemption request, you can call that same help hotline and ask for a exemption status request or status update request. So some of the things you might be hearing from people and how to answer them. So how often do I have to report these work requirements or my exemptions? Exemptions, first and foremost, if you think you're exempt, you're going to want to attest to the exemption ASAP, so yesterday. However, once you have been approved for an exemption, then you only need to report it um, at the time of your next redetermination. So essentially, uh, exemptions are good for 6 months. And then at your redetermination, you'll either have to say that circumstance is still true, or my circumstances changed and I'm either eligible for a different exemption for XYZ reason, or I'm no longer eligible for an exemption, right? So for 6 months, report your exemption, you're good till redetermination. If you are not exempt, so if you're not exempt for any reason and you're meeting the work requirement or trying to meet the work requirement, you only have to report. So first of all, report yesterday that like I am meeting these things and here's my proof. But then you don't need to report again unless you fall below the 80-hour requirement or become no longer meeting the work requirement, right? Um, and there's a little bit of space and forgiveness in this. Like, do you have good cause? We'll talk about good cause on the next slide. Um, but if you are, say, like you're not exempt, you're not working, but instead you are participating in volunteering or a workforce development program. So you'll need to report when you get a new job, when you join the program, or when you start the activities um, for volunteering, and then you will have to report anytime, just like the work requirements, anytime that you no longer are meeting it, right? So if you continue to meet it month after month, you don't have to say anything to the state each month. But if you say we're volunteering for 80 hours for May, for June, you got 47 hours, you're going to want to report in June, hey, I fell below the 80. Again, this will be here for your reference on a slide when I send them over, but this is kind of a guide to let folks know, like, you do not have to report every single month. I'm so like, and I know that as traumatized as we have all been from the IDHS, that's our impulse. But in some cases, it could hurt you, right? For those exemptions, if you lose your exemption, don't tell them until 6 months. Keep that exemption for the 6 months, right? And what is good cause? Um, Good cause is anything that happens that is outside of your control that prevents you from being able to follow the work requirements or report the work requirements, right? So if you have lack of transportation, a last minute schedule change, if you were suddenly ill, this is all good cause, meaning that ah, um, you don't need to make up that reporting and no action needs to be taken. Um, If you want to be sure that you don't accrue a countable month, um, you need to talk about that good cause, right? So for that same instance that I was talking about, like I volunteered 80 hours in May, 47 hours in June. I want to, when I report, hey, I didn't do 80 hours in May, I'm going to also want to talk about that good cause. I didn't do 80 hours in May because I was actually ill. I didn't do 80 hours in May because someone in my house was ill and I had to take care of them. I didn't do 80 hours in May because I had to send my car to the shop and I couldn't afford it, so I couldn't get to my volunteering, right? So keeping those in mind, that's going to help you not have that 3 month strike, right? That's going to keep you off of the strike zone. Meaning that there are some circumstances in which you're not meeting this requirement, that it's not going to be held against you because of this good cause. How do I prove that I am volunteering or doing training hours to meet my work requirements? So volunteer hours can be performed at any institution. It does not or any individual. It does not need to be a 501(c)(3). It does not need to be nonprofit. Um, and it does not need to be an organization. It can be your neighbor. And there's no definition for what constitutes as a qualifying activity. So if it is a need that you are meeting for an organization or for a person, then it is volunteering. And in order to document that, you can get a letter from that organization or the individual flagging for everyone that it does not need to be notarized. Um, there is an Illinois form, there's an Illinois form for everything called a snack activities report that you can use to document your volunteer or training hours. I don't love the form. It's pretty imperfect. It's pretty much designed to be like for someone who meets all 80 hours every single month at one organization. And we just know that that's not really feasible for most folks. If you are volunteering, you can actually search for opportunities on Serve Illinois. That is a database that the state has come together with that allows you to search by zip code volunteer hours that are near to you. So if you're an organization and you want to offer volunteer hours, I encourage you to create a profile so that folks can find you and log their hours. And if you're an individual who needs volunteer hours, I think it's worth creating a profile. Serve Illinois will actually maintain a record for you of all of the hours that you complete and where. And then you have the ability to just pull that report, print it, and send it to IDHS to prove your volunteer hours. For the folks who are in a SNAP training program or any qualifying workforce development, any record of attendance works. Let's see, the Jobs Ready IL is similar to Serve Illinois, and it has a lot of training workforce development that you can take online, and it will also generate a report for you. So you can get a letter, you can have a report generated, all of those things can be faxed to the IDHS office, and all of that should count to prove that you are meeting your work requirements. Okay, worst case scenario, what happens if I am not exempt and I cannot meet the work requirements? So as we mentioned, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a little over time. Are we still good? I think I have 3 more slides, maybe.
Yeah, we're about a minute over, but I'm okay with hanging tight as long as everyone else is able to stay on as well.
Okay.
So, but if anyone has to go, feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. You will get these slides, so if you need to jump, you'll have the rest of these. And I'll do a speed version of this here. So if you are not exempt and not meeting requirements, you can receive SNAP for 3 months, after which you will be removed for the program in a 36-month or fixed 3-year period. I have that as an asterisk because you need to know that the fixed year period is for the entire state. So all cases in Illinois are subject to the same 3-year period. For us, our 3-year period is going to end this year on December 31st. So the worst case scenario for somebody is you lose your benefits after 3 months, and then you have to wait until January 1st, 2027 to apply and receive benefits again. However, if you become exempt or become compliant with the rule, you can apply at any time. You can get reconnected at any time. You do not have to wait 36 months to receive that SNAP as long as you fall back into compliance or into an exemption. And if folks are affected by these changes and are removed from their SNAP program and they have kiddos on their case, the kids will still receive the SNAP. Only the impacted adults who are removed will no longer receive the benefits, but I will name that that's removing someone from your case, which means that your benefit allotment will go down. And then, of course, if anyone needs it, regardless of their circumstances or their connection to public benefits, they can always visit the Find Food tool that I mentioned and visit any of the pantries in Cook County to receive food access. This is another slide. So when should folks follow up with IDHS? I think that my Autumn opinion is if you think you need to follow up with IDHS, do it. But here are some tried and true timelines. If you apply for SNAP and didn't hear anything after 14 days, call IDHS. If you apply for SNAP and didn't receive a notice of decision after 30 days, call IDHS. If you were denied, call IDHS. If you have any questions about your application at any point in time, call IDHS or call the Food Depository. We're really happy to help navigate some of those situations. Okay, that's it. That's it for me. Thank you all. I appreciate you. If you have questions but can't stick around because I'm over time, feel free to hit this QR code and you can send me some questions through there, or this is my information. You can reach out to myself or to my colleague Ronnie, and we're here to assist you with any of these questions at any time. Thank you so much, y'all. I hope you have a great day and stay cool.
Great. Thank you, everyone.